So, how's your fantasy football season going? What's that you say? Your starting running back has already pulled both hamstrings, and your sleeper pick is still sleeping? Well, it's not too late to save your season and win huge cash prizes at DraftKings.com. DraftKings is the destination for one-week fantasy football. That means no season-long commitments to busts and bench warmers. Never again will injuries have you combing the waiver wire at 2 a.m. Every week is a brand new season at DraftKings. Just pick your contest, draft your team, and follow the action live. Renew old rivalries with friends and play them every week. Or try 50-50 contests, where the top half of all entries win cash. Even if your current fantasy team is circling the drain, you can still win huge cash prizes at DraftKings. Don't wait. Start your new season at DraftKings.com now. Use code TAKE and play free with your first deposit. That's code TAKE to play free for your share of over $100,000 in total prizes this weekend. Only at DraftKings.com. Eligibility restrictions may apply. See site for details.
Good day. Coming up on the First Take podcast on this Friday Eve, will NBA teams boycott the White House in President-elect Trump? Plus, how should Dak Prescott feel about the way the Cowboys are handling Tony Romo? And did Wade make a mistake in leaving the Heat for the Bulls? We get into all of it. Let's get it started. Good day. Welcome into First Take on, do you know what today's Max Kellerman?
Friday Eve.
Friday Eve. Yes. Stephan A, how are we doing? Good morning.
People, I would deeply appreciate it if y'all stop bragging about the fact that it's Friday Eve. Only two of y'all have weekends off. One other person never does.
Who has weekends off? I'd like to meet the person. I don't know weekends off.
It would be y'all.
Yeah?
You know
really?
What,
Since
Stephen?
when?
Fight this week, next week, and the week after that.
Do me a favor. Never complain about taxes, things of that nature, because I'd like your paycheck. How about that?
Well,
and you get a loss for words for once. A loss for words. I'm available on weekends, baby. You want to pay me? Okay.
My bad.
We
We can change the subject. We can move on.
Right.
We can move on.
Yes. Coming up, Colin Kaepernick explains why he did not vote for president. You do not want to miss these two going off on that topic a little bit later in the show. And it's been a whirlwind week. So let's walk through what's transpired. Tuesday was Election Day. Early Wednesday, Donald J. Trump was named the 45th president of the United States. Yesterday, Pistons head coach Stan Van Gundy was very outspoken on his displeasure with the state of our country and the election. And Warriors coach Steve Kerr echoing those sentiments, disappointed in how the election turned out. Of course, disappointed in Trump being president, the state of our country, so many other things on that subject. So they say life is all about timing. And now today, President Barack Obama is scheduled to welcome Trump to the Oval Office this morning to start the customary transition of power. Then this afternoon on the South Lawn, LeBron James and the Cavs are scheduled to be at the White House to celebrate the team's 2016 NBA championship. Max, do you think teams in the NBA will start to boycott these White House visits?
Yes, I do. And Steve Kerr and Stan Van Gundy spoke beautifully about the subject. You see, an election does not legitimize racist, xenophobic, or misogynistic words, thoughts, and ideas. It does not legitimize them. It does not legitimize that kind of talk and attitude. There will be White House boycotts. Trump was elected on divisive tribal rhetoric. Now, hopefully, I think the hope is, I believe Steve Kerr touched on this, that was really just the kind of Machiavellian, the ends justify the means, and a cynical manipulation of voters, and that you know, as that's not the way he's going to govern. A lot of people feel like, I don't care what you say, the ends justify the means. The ends do not justify the means. And if you sow divisions, that's it, I'm done with you. If you say the kind of things you said, the kind of stuff that would get a lot of us fired from our jobs, that would get you fired from your job, that's not okay. Even though the election legitimizes the candidacy, it does not legitimize that kind of behavior and rhetoric. Others will say, well, if it was a cynical manipulation, we'll wait and see based on what policy he actually enacts. If Trump behaves in a way as a unifier, the person who will govern, rather than Trump, the divisive candidate, then I think you will see fewer boycotts. But it would be hard for me to imagine a world in which NBA teams don't boycott the White House, at least some, if not most of them.
Well, I'm glad you ended your soliloquy with that point, because you're absolutely right. The operative word in all of this is some. And I'm going to say something here, and it's not going to come across as very popular, but we're real on First Take, and I know I am, so let me get this out the way. It's time for all of us to put on our big boy pants, all right, and our big girl pants, and understand what the situation is. Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America. Stan Van Gundy was absolutely right with what he said. So was Steve Kerr and what he alluded to, because racist rhetoric, misogynistic rhetoric, xenophobic rhetoric has no place in our politics or in our nation overall. We get that. We understand that. But we have to understand that if you're talking about xenophobia, obviously you're talking about illegal immigration, and what Trump's positions were on that matter. If you're talking about the Ku Klux Klan, endorsing him, that certainly didn't resonate in an affectionate manner with the African American community. We get that. But I'm a person, Max Kellerman, that has repeatedly sat up on this platform, on radio and beyond, elocuting to the masses, reminding everybody. Black folks make up about 13 to 14% of the population. The Latino population makes up about 17% of the population. Combined, you're talking about anywhere from 33 to 37% of the American population. Well, what about the rest? There's a white America out there. And by the way, let's make sure that as incredibly unfair as it seems, as wrong as it may appear to be, and there's no doubt that you and I both feel the same way, Max, in that regard, the reality is that everyone who voted for Donald Trump isn't a racist, a misogynist, or xenophobic. They may have paid no attention to that stuff. As irresponsible as that is, when you go to the voting booth, there are many people, a matter of fact, I dare say most Americans in our nation, who go to the voting booth and all they care about is their own personal issues. If they can't pay their mortgage, that's what they're concerned about. If they need a job, that's what they're concerned about. If they want health care, that's what they're concerned about. Their lone issue is what they're primarily concerned about. And so now we transition to the NBA. And I bring all of that up to say this. I appreciate Stan Van Gundy's position. He's absolutely on the money. And I applaud him because he's honest, he's educated, he's intelligent, and he's passionate. I love that man. Steve Kerr, I totally concur with everything he said. Outside of talking about sports media and everybody yelling at folks, we're talking sports, Steve Kerr. We ain't talking politics here. We're not trying to legislate the lives of other individuals. And by the way, Steve Kerr can get a temper tantrum himself on the sideline. So I guess he's throwing himself into that equation. But for the most part, what he said was absolutely correct. But everybody in the NBA may not share that view. A vast majority of folks may share that view because a vast majority of the players are black. But there are white players who may not feel that way. Just because they're silent about it doesn't mean that they necessarily agree. And Max, when you and I talked off the record prior to the election, you and I were having a debate. And remember, you were joking around and you were like, come on, Stephen A. I said to you, Trump's going to get about 60 million votes. You said, why do you feel that way? If you recall, we were talking about this week ago.
I thought he would get a lot of votes. I didn't think he would win, but I thought he would get a lot of votes.
I didn't say that you didn't say that. I said you were asking me why I felt that way. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying. And what I said to you at that time is there's millions of people who aren't saying anything. They ain't protesting the flag. They're not kneeling. They're not, they're not venting about a lot of things. They're just sitting back quietly. And when it comes time to go into the voting booth, they're going to go in there by themselves. They're going to close the curtain. They're going to vote for him. They're not going to talk about it beforehand. They ain't going to say anything afterwards. But in the end, that's what's going to potentially happen, which is why I thought it was going to be very tight.
I hear what you're saying, but I reject that analysis. In fact, what happened in this election is fewer people voted. Fewer people voted for Trump than they did for recent Republican candidates, but even fewer people voted for Hillary than voted for Obama in the last two elections, although more people voted for Hillary than for Trump. In fact, Hillary was more representative of America than Trump. Very slightly. It's silly to even argue about it because it was essentially a tie, but not in the Electoral College because in addition to white people being the majority voting bloc, not bigger than the multiracial coalition that includes some white people when that coalition has been animated, but it clearly wasn't in this election. But in addition to them having the biggest numbers, that kind of lockstep white voting bloc that hears that call to that tribal call to racial identity, the way the Electoral College is set up also overly empowers small rural states. The swing states and the small states get a disproportionate electoral vote. Therefore, when you say, well, let's keep in mind that there's a white America and that's who's spoken, etc. Okay, they were clearly more animated, at least the core was, by this candidate. But as a statement of fact, more people voted for her. And the idea that because African American, basically black and brown people in this country are not the majority, that doesn't mean that the coalition they formed, which is interracial, is not the majority, which it is. I mean, it is.
Well, you can say that, but the game of politics is played, particularly with the presidential election. It's played with that electoral college vote. Mm-hmm. So it ain't just about the numbers. It's about locale. It's about geography. It's about how many electoral college votes are in certain places. What I'm saying is the game has been out there for ages. Al Gore, George W. Bush. It was the same argument then. But in the end, what happened? We saw what happened. So it ain't just about the numbers. So bringing up the numbers is null and void. We understand what the battle was, and you just have to deal with that, which is why I talk about all of us putting on our big boy and big girl pants.
I'm not
wait a minute.
Legitimacy.
I'll let you speak. I got that. I didn't say you were. I'm trying to get to a point. My point to you is when we talk about the NBA, we got to talk about moving forward. Because in the end, what it comes down to is whether it's racist, it's misogynistic, it's xenophobic, you got a whole bunch of people out there that believe that. And then you also have a whole bunch of people out there that believe you had an individual candidate that just said it because he needed to do what he needed to do just to get votes, to get in the office, because the politicians lie all the time anyway. You got people who actually believe that. So while you may have some NBA teams that are going to sit up there and say, ain't no way in hell I'm going to the White House to see this man, you may have others down the road who may not have a problem with it over the next 4 years, particularly if our economy is better and other things that they like are taking place, all of a sudden that might die down.
Yeah, particularly, there will always be, obviously, in any national election, even when it seems lopsided, as a percentage of the voters, when 5 million votes determines the election in a country of 300 million, there is almost half the country who feels differently. So clearly that will be the case even in the NBA, which is a predominantly African-American and now increasingly European and South American league. You will still find members of teams who wouldn't. But I think by and large, unless Trump is true to his word in his acceptance speech, where he acts as a unifier and not as a divider that he campaigned as, well, in that case, there will be others who also say, well, wait a minute, he did what he had to do to get elected. It's not that we forgive that kind of lack of civility and that kind of public discourse, but he is elected now, and, oh, look, the policies aren't that bad, that sort of thing. But based on what we've seen so far, I would remain cynical about that, although hopeful.
There's no way that anybody's going to support him if he continues the rhetoric that he was spewing during the campaign. But I'm making the argument that you got a lot of folks out there. Damn sure wasn't you or nor I, but you got a lot of folks out there who voted for him. Not all of them, but a lot of them who never believed he believed what he was saying, that he was catering and pandering to a constituency that was going to get him in office. God, listen, there's a constituency in America that gets pimped all the time. Let's just call it what it is. You got people out there that they get fooled by politicians, or they recognize that politicians may be just taking a stance just because they're trying to get into office. You've got two candidates on polar opposite sides of the spectrum that are butting heads with one another. And what does Hillary Clinton do? What does President Obama do? The very next day, we must come together. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team, blah, blah, blah. You never thought that you would really hear such such a classy approach to everything, considering how cantankerous and what a divide existed during the election. But in this great country of ours, people talk all the stuff that they want to talk during the election process. And then when the election is over and a winner has then been defined, all of a sudden you transition to governing. And that's the way it goes. So when the NBA talks about, if everybody thinks that for 1 second that no NBA team or no NFL team or nobody's going to go into the White House, if you ask me that question right now, now? Would they want to go, January 30th or something like that? Hell no, too soon. But come to me next year, and let's see if we're not hearing folks talking about let's all be as one, let's all come together and respect the office. I guarantee you, people are going to take a shift. Don't think otherwise for 1 second.
I agree. There are likely going to be teams if, as you say, the governance is different than the rhetoric during the campaign, that will soften their position. And hopefully the governance is different than the rhetoric during the campaign.
It has to be, no doubt.
Let's leave it there. How about we talk some football now, shall we? After a 4-4 start to the season, Big Ben channels his inner Aaron Rodgers and tells Steeler fans to relax. But should Pittsburgh be worried about the men of steel? Find out next. Meanwhile, to the pros, Ben Roethlisberger returned against the Ravens Sunday after being sidelined for one game with a knee injury. Ben struggled a bit. Many thought he came back too soon. So the Steelers have dealt with suspensions and injury this season, and the black and yellow are currently 4-4, tied for first in the AFC North with Baltimore. Ben, what do you have to say to concerned Steelers fans?
I could do the Aaron Rodgers relax, but I'm just going to say it's halftime. We're at halftime, and we've had a lot of great second halves in my career and in Pittsburgh Steelers history. So whether it's a half of a game or a half of a season, so it's not over yet. And I look forward. I'm excited for the second half of the season.
It's halftime, baby. Damian Woody in the house. How we doing?
I'm good. What's up, everyone?
I thought
Always
good to see you.
You guys might have kicked me out of here from beating your head in too much, man. I thought you took away my invite for a minute.
And by the way, first of all, nice haircut. You're looking pretty dapper.
Oh, yeah, I'm noticed the red tie right now.
I noticed the red tie. You trying to make a statement this morning? I'm just asking.
The only statement I'm making is about what I'm about to do to you guys, man. That's the only statement I'm about to make.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell you, man, I'm not scared of you on TV, only in person.
Yeah, that's why you remote right now. You're not right here in front of me.
Exactly.
That does happen a lot. I'll be back.
Exactly. Let's talk about Ben's statement. Are you confident that he can help these Steelers get back on track?
I'm worried. I'm worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. Look, anyone who's watched the Steelers, one thing that's very apparent with their offense, they are one-dimensional. And if you're opposing team playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers, or just any team, that's what you want to have. You want a team to be one-dimensional, so then you start honing in on what they're doing. Listen, with the great Le'Veon Bell, the Steelers are in the bottom 5 in rushing yards per game and rushing attempts per game. And I'm going the last four games. That's not good. When you have a running back as good as Le'Veon Bell, the offensive line that the Pittsburgh Steelers have, you need to feature him more in the running game. Second, where's Antonio Brown? Listen, Antonio Brown is great. He's one of the best receivers in the game. But when you look at his stats from this year as opposed to last year, he's down about 30 yards per game. That's a huge clip as far as Antonio Brown. So are people doubling him, taking him away? Maybe so. Look, Big Ben has been in and out of the lineup, so there might be some type of, things going on with the passing game. So then you have to say, okay, I need all the other guys to step up. Sammy Coates, where are you? He's been targeted 21 times in the last 4 games, only got 7 catches. Dude, you're on the back of a milk carton right now. I mean, your boy Antonio Brown facing double teams. The offense needs you. They're one-dimensional. You're facing one-on-one coverage, and all you have is 7 catches in 4 games? That's pitiful. That is absolutely pitiful. So, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that, things are going to get turned around, because as we know in the National Football League, you are what you are. And right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a one-dimensional team that really doesn't do what they're doing, which is passing the ball. They don't do it that well.
All right, how confident are we in Big Ben and the Steelers? First of all, I want to address 2 things. One, I think they fell a little bit in love, maybe Tom did, with Le'Veon Bell's versatility. You can move him around, do all these different things with him, and maybe not just hand him the ball sometimes and let him run, especially behind that O-line, as you mentioned. And Antonio Brown this year is where Odell Beckham Jr. was last year. It's hard when there are no other real receiving targets that are doing anything, and the other team knows you put a safety, a bracket, you put extra guys. I mean, it's hard to perform, which is what I've been saying about Odell and his comparison to Antonio Brown. Now that's happening to him. Look at the numbers. Now, here are the reasons to get nervous about the Steelers. Their defense is tied for worst in terms of sacks, tied for fourth worst in terms of takeaways, in terms of picks, which is always bad. I mean, that a lot of times determines games because other things tend to cancel out. They're 24th overall in yards. So what is that? 8th worst in yards per game, which is called total defense for some reason, right? But okay, in yards per game. They just lost to their arch rival Ravens. Roethlisberger had the knee surgery, then the bye week, and then looked terrible. Like, there are lots of reasons to be concerned. But pump the brakes on the concern just a little bit. Their schedule is not killer. It's not like they have any games on the schedule. Like, there's no Patriots, there's no Seahawks, there's no even like Raiders or Falcons or anyone like that on their schedule. There it is. I mean, you have like, it's a regular NFL schedule. You have 2 games against the Browns, right? You chalk those up as wins. The Colts, no great shakes. The Giants are, this year a typical NFL team, as are the Bills, the Bengals too. There are no world beaters there. And right now, as bad as everything is, they're 4-4. Yeah, they're so tied for the best record in the division. And half those games come at home, including the game this weekend. And Roethlisberger's really good at home. QBR is 84. So I'm not saying the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl. I never thought they were going to get out of the AFC. But Steelers fans, calm down. You're going to be all right.
Well, listen, you point out the schedule, and you listed all these teams that they're quote unquote supposed to be. Didn't they lose to the Miami Dolphins? We don't consider the Miami Dolphins to be, a juggernaut or anything like that. So this whole thing about the schedule of cupcakes, there are no cupcakes in the National Football League. There are really no cupcakes in the National Football League. What do you have to say?
Excuse me. Yeah, you damn right I got something to say.
Oh,
y'all
say
fall
it then.
back. Don't be rude. I'm sitting on the screen and y'all got me waiting. That's very rude.
Man,
very rude.
Make your point, man.
I'm getting to my point.
Steven,
you don't rush me, Woody.
This,
You're a guest. You watch your mouth, Woody. You watch your mouth, okay? Let me tell you something right now. Here's my problem with your synopsis, Woody. How is it that you bring up all of these things and don't bring up Big Ben Roethlisberger primarily in this respect? He's played 7 games this year. He has completed 55% of his passes or less in 4 of those games. 51% against Cincinnati, 54% against Philadelphia in that blowout loss, which a lot of them was garbage time because they were getting annihilated. 55% against Miami, another loss. 51% last week, 23 of 45 against Baltimore. I understand they should be giving the ball to Le'Veon Bell more. They should have better than a 25th ranked rushing attack. We all know what the problem is with their secondary. That's the one problem I got with Mike T, who I love dearly. I'm tired of the secondary being suspect or worse year after year after year. What have I said on many times, Woody, Max? I'm very, very big on what your identity is. Mike T was on the defensive side of the ball as a coordinator before he became a head coach. So I expect your defense to be up to snuff. And we all know that ain't the case with the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a huge, huge problem. So when I look at it from that perspective, that's something that has to be fixed between him and Keith Butler, the defensive coordinator, and I understand that. But speaking offensively, Ben Roethlisberger has not been on target. Ben Roethlisberger has been off for a vast majority of the season. Ben Roethlisberger, a future Hall of Famer, a great player, somebody I love. I'm telling you right now, I ain't satisfied with his performance. And I understand last week was rust, so I'll give him that. But what about the other 3 games before he got hurt? The guy wasn't playing up to snuff consistently. He's been a roller coaster ride, very erratic all year long. So when we look at the rest of the Steelers, whether it's Antonio Brown, whether it's Darius Hayward-Bay, whether it's Sammy Coates or anybody else, we must go back to Big Ben Roethlisberger because he may very well be playing a role with the level of ineptitude that we have seen from the Pittsburgh Steelers compared to what we are accustomed to seeing from them. This is Big Ben Roethlisberger's team. Period. And he is, we know what he can do. I believe what he will do. But based on what he has done thus far, He has not measured up to snuff, and I believe that's why you're seeing the lack of production from the receivers, because Big Ben Roethlisberger ain't been doing what he's capable of doing.
Well, listen, Stephen A., let me tell you how the game of football is played, how it's done. If your defense isn't up to snuff, you can't run the ball. You are just a one-dimensional puppy. These defensive coordinators aren't stupid. They're going to key in on the things that you like to do and take them away. As great as Big Ben Roethlisberger is, he can only do so much. And I'm not absolving him from how he's playing this year, because it's obviously not up to the standard that he's been playing for years. But it doesn't matter if you're Big Ben, if you're Tom Brady. It doesn't matter. If you have elements of your team or players on your team that's not contributing, that's not playing up to the level that they're supposed to, how do you expect one person to carry the whole team? It doesn't work that way in pro football.
I'm not challenging that notion, and I certainly will defer to your football knowledge ahead of mine. I'm not questioning that. What I'm saying to you is this. Let's get back to your initial premise. You're saying if your defense isn't up to snuff, then you are a one-dimensional team, meaning that you have to throw the football because the defense isn't stopping anybody. So when you get the ball on offense, you have to throw the ball. Is that what you're saying?
No, actually, I didn't mention anything about defense when I first started talking. I was just exclusively on the offensive side of the ball.
You did say, you may have been a slip of the tongue, you said defense. You said defense.
Yeah, you did say defense.
No defense,
you did say
defense. You can't run the ball.
Okay, well, maybe that.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Even still, that still plays into my point. If you don't have if you can't stop, if you can't get off the field on defense and you don't run the football, how are you?
Hold it. Wait a minute.
How are you supposed to win games?
Now I'm challenging you.
How are you supposed to win games, Stephen A?
Hold on. Now I'm getting ready to tell you.
Okay,
now
go ahead.
I'm challenging you. If you can run the football effectively yourself.
Right.
That's how you spell for the defense.
Because
if you're on the field and you're moving the chains. All right, but the Steelers ain't doing that. Ain't doing that.
So have you been listening to what I've been saying? That's what I said right out the gate. I said the Steelers over the last 4 games are in the bottom 5 of the league in rushing the ball and rushing attempts. They're not even trying to rush the ball. They are one-dimensional. They're just spreading them out like this is Oklahoma or something and throwing the ball over the field.
Hold on. I got that. But my problem with what you're saying, Damian, is this. Even if they're throwing the football too much, and I can agree with you that they need to run the ball more, particularly when you got Le'Veon Bell and D'Angelo Williams down there, my flip side to this, Damian, is this. Damn, it's Big Ben. You got Antonio Brown, you got Coach, you got Haywood Bay. You got Le'Veon Bell coming out of the backfield catching passes. Big Ben Roethlisberger's numbers should look better than what they've looked. He's not doing something.
About that, Damian, and both of you guys.
Yeah.
To me, it looks like Roethlisberger after the knee is different. It looks like against Baltimore, it looked like he's not the same guy. Like he's too hurt to be out there playing, and he's going out there coming off the bye and everything. He had a couple of weeks, but how much is the injury right now, or the surgery affecting his play?
Well, it's called Father Time. Father Time is undefeated. He holds the championship belt. You know those WWE belts.
One draw against Bernard Hopkins.
He holds the belt. Father Time holds the belt. So over time,
he's 34.
Big Ben has taken all of these beatings, taken all these hits. This is what you start to see.
What I mean is a knee surgery, in your experience, if a guy has what Roethlisberger, you get a little procedure in the middle of the season, is that something where over the course of the season it'll get better and better, or is the pounding you take going to make it worse and worse? Because if they'll get better and better, the Steelers are fine. But if that's the new Ben Roethlisberger, they're in trouble.
Max, let me tell you something. As a former player. The best day you feel is the day you report to training camp.
And then worse and worse every week.
And it's worse and worse. So he's not going to get better. He's only going to get worse. This is all about pain tolerance and just managing, and the coach is doing that.
I will say this. Y'all are talking about how Big Ben Roethlisberger is going to look moving forward because of the knee injury he suffered. The point I'm making is before the knee suffered, he was inconsistent, which is why I'm concerned. If it was just the knee, then I would say, okay, he's got the experience. Last week was a rough patch, but that's probably why he came back a little early, get that rust out the way so he could be ready to go from here on out. We'll see. But I've seen inconsistency from him since the Monday night win over Washington. That's my issue with Big Ben Roethlisberger right now. That's why I believe there's a reason for concern, because what I've been seeing from him this year hasn't been the model of consistency. And don't tell me Antonio Brown and Sammy Coates and these boys are getting open, aren't getting open. They've been open. Ben Roethlisberger has been missing them. Not
at home. At home, he's much better than on the road this year for whatever reasons. He has his QBR is sky high at home, and they got a home game coming up. So,
Well, they've already had 4 road games, so I don't want to hear that.
They're going to wind up with
4 road games.
Bottom line,
one of them against the Browns.
Bottom line, you can't run the ball. I don't care who you have at quarterback, and your defense doesn't play ball. It's very hard to do anything at the quarterback position.
Who are you really worried about?
Hold on. You know enough about football, Damian, where I know I'm going old school here, but Dan Marino didn't have a running game. Dan Fouts didn't have a running game. There's been plenty of people in the past. Big Ben Roethlisberger at times didn't have an elite running game, but he still looked big time. You don't have to have a running game to be a quarterback if you have the requisite receivers to be big time.
I have another question.
You don't have to have a running game to show big time.
Who are you guys really worried about in the AFC North? I'm not saying the Steelers definitely got this locked up, but they got the same record as the Ravens, though in the head-to-head now they have a loss. The Ravens, the Bengals, certainly not the Browns. There's no killer team in the division right now that they really have to sweat. So they can kind of chug along, treading water, and if they get hot late, they got the division. Who are you really worried about in the AFC North?
Let me give you my definition of greatness. Greatness is when you ain't worried about anybody but yourself. Because if you handle your business, everything will fall in place. When you're not great, then you look elsewhere.
But the question is not if they're great.
But that's not in football, it doesn't work that way. Yeah, you can be great, but if other guys aren't being great, then it's not going to make you look great. That's how the game of football is.
All right.
I was talking collectively as a team to address Max's point.
No.
Listen up.
I got it.
I didn't think that we're going to be great this year.
Damian, you're not going anywhere. And speaking of great, the Cowboys have been exceptional.
Why he ain't going nowhere?
And they come to town because he needs to get into this next topic as well. When they host the Cowboys, now Tony Romo also trying to come back, and the whole team has been praising Romo. How should Dak feel about this? Tony's healthy. We'll get into all of it when First Take returns with Damian Woody.
I'm Eric Carabell. On the latest fantasy-focused baseball podcast, Tristan Cockroft and I discuss what was learned from the baseball playoffs for fantasy purposes, prospects on display at Arizona Fall League who looked great, plus many, many hash browns to answer.
So now that Tony Romo's playing status has shifted from a doctor's decision to a coach's, according to our Ed Werder, all eyes have been on number 9 in practice. Cowboys linebacker Sean Lee said Romo looks great in his first full practice, adding he hasn't missed a beat. So, Damian, how should Dak feel? He's led this team to a 7-1 start about all the attention that Romo's receiving.
If I was Dak, I would just give a big fat yawn. Why? Why should I care? I don't care. Let everyone talk. Because you know why? Because you can't control what anybody else says, especially when you talk about Tony Romo. Listen, Dak Prescott is in the top 5 in both quarterback rating and QBR. That's balling, okay? Dallas Cowboys are 7-1. That's balling. So the only way Tony Romo would unseat me if I just start sticking it up and the Dallas Cowboys start losing games. So if I'm Dak Prescott, man, I'm tuning out all that noise. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, staying focused on what's really important, and that's getting prepared every week to win football games. I could care less what people are saying about Tony Romo. Let them talk about Tony Romo, because guess what? The more they talk about Romo, the less time they want to talk to me and interrupt my focus on what's really important. That's winning football games.
You are such a disappointment. You are such a disappointment.
Man,
I cannot believe that you're going to sit there and be totally oblivious to the accident waiting to happen that is Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. You and I both know that that's what Dak should do, and I'm not refuting that. But come on now. You act like if he wins and he plays game, he still can't end up getting screwed over. These are the Cowboys, man. You know they'll find a way to mess it up.
Listen,
you know how they roll.
I know you are
Why you acting like you don't know that?
Cowboys. I know you are a hater towards the Dallas Cowboys.
But you love them now? You love them now?
Listen, Jerry Jones ain't no fool in this respect. If you win in football games, why in the world would you pull somebody out when you balling, you getting all the attention?
He's
getting attention because we know Jerry Jones loves attention. So it doesn't even, from a business perspective, football, I don't care what perspective you're talking about, it doesn't make 1 cent to pull Dak Prescott from the lineup.
I totally agree with you. And that's why I said you being hard-headed. You're not listening.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
agree with you. We're on the same page. But I'm saying to you, this is Jerry Jones we're talking about here. And for you to sit up there and bloviate like those opinions of, that belief of his is something that could be relied upon. Come on. Now, we all know that Tony Romo's like an adopted son to him. I wouldn't be surprised at all if I saw Tony Romo this year, whether Dak Prescott is winning or not, because that's Jerry Jones' way. And you talk about winning, he wants that attention. Well, let me tell you something. Jerry Jones was winning Super Bowl titles. It didn't stop him from getting rid of Jimmy Johnson. Why? Because he wanted the attention, even when he was winning. And he was willing to make a bold move, even when he was winning, because he wanted to disrupt the apple cart, because he wanted credit for what was transpiring. And I wouldn't be surprised at all, even though he has obviously aged and he's an elder lad now than he was then. So clearly, you presume that he's a bit wiser. The bottom line is, I can't put anything past Jerry Jones. I can't rely on him to do the obvious wise thing because he's Jerry Jones and the Cowboys.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Wouldn't he get the credit because isn't he the one that drafted Dak Prescott? So this whole notion that he got rid of, Jimmy Johnson.
He loves Tony Romo, man.
That's like an adopted son.
Leave it to me to answer. Since no one wants to answer your question, Molly.
I answered it.
Since no one wants to answer Molly's question, I'll answer it.
Okay, go ahead.
The question was, correct me if I'm wrong, how should Dak Prescott feel about all of Tony Romo's attention? How should he feel? Okay, look. Dak Prescott's a third-round pick. Dak Prescott has been balling.
Fourth.
But, fourth round pick? All right, fourth round. All right, sure. Yeah, that's right, fourth round pick. For the point, he's not a first round draft pick. And the only reason he has, and he's a rookie, and the only reason he has the job is because Romo got hurt. Now, this is the history of the NFL. I don't care who you are. I always bring up Kurt Warner and Mark Bulger because that's how Kurt Warner got his job, too. I don't care if you're the MVP of the league on the greatest offense of all time. If you get hurt, you can absolutely lose your job to injury if the team is rolling with another guy. Even if that guy's not balling, even if the team is just winning, that guy's going to stay right there. So as long as he's winning, he's good. Like you said, he's balling, he's winning, he's good. But what about the way he should feel about what Stephen A is talking about, the fact that Jerry Jones is being asked and therefore talking about Tony Romo? He should feel fine because it's not like Romo's a bum. Romo, if you don't want to call him an elite quarterback, which I think you could easily make the argument he is, he's the next thing to it. He's a really, really good quarterback who in recent years has been winning almost all the games he's been playing. Like, if you look at the record with Romo in for the Cowboys, they've been an excellent team. It was only when he was hurt that they fell off. So if you're a fourth-round pick and a rookie and a tremendous quarterback is now getting healthy and he's been there for years and the owner is saying, hey, he's really good too, you shouldn't feel any kind of way about that. Just keep balling, keep winning. It won't even be an issue.
So isn't that what I said?
Kind of.
So you basically said
what you said.
Yes, but I like the way I say it better.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
But I don't agree. I don't agree. Listen, I don't agree with it from this perspective. We all know that all Dak can do is keep balling. I'm just saying that to me, to just shrug it off your shoulders, he has to do that to perform. So it's not really about him. It's about how wrong Jerry Jones and the Cowboys are to continuously be making another story out of Romo with the way Dak Prescott is playing. Because I don't care how Tony Romo is looking in practice. I don't care that it's now out of the hands of the doctors and it's now in the hands of the coaches. My point is it's not even something that should be thought about right now, the way this team is rolling, the way Dak is rolling, when you consider what the recent history in terms of productivity on the part of the Dallas Cowboys have been for the last 2 decades. The fact that you have this young lion, this young stud, who, by the way, doesn't have 4 back injuries in the last 2.5 to 3 years, should tell you something, and you should leave it be. But they seem to be oblivious to the potential impact that it could potentially have on Dak Prescott by constantly throwing Tony Romo's name out there in the headlines. And there's only one reason for that. That's because Jerry Jones loves his adopted son, and in the grand scheme of things, he probably wishes that Tony Romo was the guy that was in there. As the NFL experts, Damian, that you talk to all the time, I'm sure will have told you, Jerry Jones has said very, very little to Dak Prescott. Just left him hanging out there. And this brother produces. And I just think that he deserves better than what he's receiving from the Cowboys at this moment.
Have you ever thought about it from this angle? Maybe if he doesn't hype up Dak Prescott, it's actually doing him a favor. Have you thought about that?
Well, I wasn't saying to hype him up.
Snap.
I'm saying to stop talking about Romo.
Say it again.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I wasn't
what he's saying is it's taking the attention off of Dak.
Talking about Romo.
Right. What I'm saying is, by Jerry Jones not hyping up Dak, is actually doing him a favor. So he cannot be worried about the distractions from media and everyone else trying to get on the Dak train.
I mean, Damien, what Damien Woody, the Cowboy fan, that's very understanding.
What I'm saying don't make sense.
I'm just saying.
It makes perfect sense what I'm saying.
I didn't say it doesn't make sense. I didn't say it doesn't make sense, but you're very understanding.
Stephen A. Smith.
Very sympathetic
Stephen
to
A.
the
Smith,
Cowboys.
whatever you think of the accident waiting to happen in Jerry Jones' irrational behavior, whatever, what do you think? I'm curious because you seem to feel like it's intentional, like Jerry Jones is so attached to Tony Romo that he's doing something that's bad for Dak Prescott. What do you think goes on in his head when he doesn't praise his all-world rookie quarterback? You think he's sitting there twirling his mustache going, I'm not going to praise Dak Prescott because I like Tony Romo so much?
I think Jerry Jones is conflicted. I think he loves the fact that his Cowboys are winning and he's loving every moment of it. I think at the same time, just as much as he loves winning and he appreciates the job that Dak Prescott has done, he is craving for the opportunity to present itself for Tony Romo to be back in there because I don't think he just wants to win. He wants to win with Tony Romo, whether it's because Tony Romo has been there forever, he's paid his dues.
One last question.
He loves the guy.
One last question.
He wants Romo
Let's
to
get
be the
out
man
of Jerry
in there.
Jones'
Hold
head
on,
for a
one last
moment.
question for Stephen A. Because when I hear Stephen A. talk about this in terms of the NBA, the alarm goes off. I go, wait, no, he's been talking to people. But also with the NFL. That sounds to me suspiciously like Stephen A. Smith. You are not simply imagining it, but you have intel. Do tell.
That is good. That is correct. I have spoken to quite a few people who have convinced me that that's exactly what they believe Jerry Jones is doing. He's craving, chomping at the bit for Tony Romo to get in there. He has nothing against Dak. Dak is the future. But as it pertains to success this year, he thinks that Tony Romo's days could be numbered, and he wouldn't mind at all if Tony Romo found himself back in that lineup, leading the Dallas Cowboys to the promised land, because he believes Dak has plenty of years to do it. It's limited, obviously, for Tony Romo.
Max, way to get to the bottom of things.
See how I read between the lines?
Yes. I saw that journalistic skills come through there. Damien, thank you so much for being with us. Always fun to have you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your perspective.
You all right?
Coming up next.
Damian Woody's fire.
Everyone, please be quiet. Colin Kaepernick offers an explanation of why he chose not to vote for president. These guys are fired up. Stay tuned.
As far as I'm concerned, Colin Kaepernick is absolutely irrelevant. My days of rooting for him have come to an end. He comes across as a flaming hypocrite. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not interested in a damn word that he has to say. Having the audacity to kneel for the national anthem, talking about how you won't stop until there is change that takes place, to turn around and not to even take your behind to the polls to vote. How pathetic can you be? It is ignorant, it is weak, it is shameful, and more importantly, is it a disrespect to our ancestors? Matter of fact, I would personally make a request to the media in this nation. Wherever he is, if he ain't on that football field trying to throw another damn incomplete pass, do me a favor and make sure one thing. Take the camera away from him.
That was yesterday. Stephen A. did not hold back in his disappointment in Colin Kaepernick for not voting after Kaepernick's national anthem protest sparked national debate. Here's what Colin had to say about why he chose not to vote in this election. Quote, I've been very disconnected from the systematic oppression as a whole. So for me, it's another face that's going to be the face of that system of oppression. And to me, it didn't really matter who went in there. The system still remains intact that oppresses people of color. Stephen A., now that you've heard from Colin in his explanation, do you feel differently towards him?
No, not at all. I still think he's a flaming hypocrite. I still think that he deserves every level of vitriol I aimed in his direction. Yesterday, I'm not holding back one bit. The only regret that I have, based on my diatribe from yesterday, is that I did not add the word selfish to the equation because he was that too. See, Colin Kaepernick's thinking about himself. Colin Kaepernick ain't thinking about oppressed people. Because if you were thinking about oppressed people, you wouldn't just take that position. You understand? You would make sure that you're doing what you could. Voting is a part of it. There is nothing in this country that has ever been accomplished without folks going to the polls to make sure their voice was heard. That's point number one. Point number two, from a historical perspective, there are people who have fought, who have bled, who have died for him to have the right to even protest without severe ramifications, I might add. He seems to have forgotten that. But more importantly than anything else, you have to remember when you kneeled, okay, you essentially brought the attention of a national microscope in your direction. You said that you were honored to have done it because you wanted to affect the lives of other people. Well, you might be fine with taking a position that you don't want to vote and what have you while collecting $12 million that you don't deserve, by the way. But then you turn around and you publicize to the world that you didn't vote. If you were trying to have an impact and you're trying to influence the lives of the many, then you understand how egregious it is that you then turned around and announced to the world that you didn't vote. So essentially, you're encouraging other individuals, particularly of a younger generation, to play no part, no role in the voting process whatsoever. The great coach Doc Rivers, a champion with the Boston Celtics, the coach and the GM for the Los Angeles Clippers, just a phenomenal coach and a phenomenal human being with this whole Trump-Hillary process going on. What did Doc Rivers say in the aftermath of all of that? It was a little bit different than Stan Van Gundy. It was a little bit different than Steve Kerr. What he said was what irritated him the most were the individuals who didn't activate themselves in this election by choosing not to vote. In the case of Colin Kaepernick, it elevates exponentially. Why? Because you didn't just not vote. You had the audacity to sit up there and announce it to the world as if you were encouraging the youth who you encouraged to begin with not to activate themselves and go out to vote. So while you ultimately will end up being okay because you're collecting $12 million that you don't deserve with your 0-3 self, completing just 52% of your passes, can't win a damn football game. You've been irrelevant as a quarterback for about 3 years now. You're going to be all right. But those youngsters on the come up that are looking to activate themselves somehow, some way to make sure they can have a profound impact on the system, they don't get to do that because an individual like you is so caught up on the evil you're convinced that exists so profoundly that you don't even want to take part in a political process where you're going to be just fine because you've been able to pocket millions. But those on the come up who will need to activate themselves to make sure they can create and provoke change, you've just encouraged them not to do it. It is egregious. It is irresponsible. It is weak. It is pathetic. It is hypocritical, and it is selfish. And that is exactly what Colin Kaepernick was in this particular situation. I ain't backing up one damn bit. I said it. I meant it. Period.
Max.
Not only am I not backing up, I want to take it further now because Stephen A. just now and both of us yesterday talked philosophically about how you have to make a choice. You have to weigh the evidence, weigh what's in front of you, and make a choice, even if you feel like the choice is suboptimal. Because if you're waiting for everything to be perfect, it's the enemy of the good. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Just make the best choice you can. If it means incremental change, fine, whatever. But we spoke broadly philosophically about this. Now I want to talk specifically about, because Colin Kaepernick, I'm angry about it, is so outrageous. The only thing I can think is that he is susceptible to low-quality information. You know, the internet means we have a lot of information, but if you don't have the faculties, if you don't have the ability to process it and sift out what's good quality information from low quality information, you are susceptible to the kind of conclusions Colin Kaepernick has drawn. Let me be specific. He says systematic oppression of I guess, black and brown lives, right? That's what he was protesting. And that neither the candidates are the same, essentially, in that sense. It's idiotic. That is idiotic. Now, look. Let me go through the list. You care about black and brown lives? What do you think about stop and frisk, which was found to be unconstitutional? How do you think that has an effect on the way police and the communities they interact with? What kind of outcomes do you expect from practices that are considered unconstitutional? Remember stop and frisk in New York City? Rudy Giuliani, he might be the head of the Department of Justice. What kind of outcomes are you expecting then? How about this? Forget about the Supreme Court for a second, which has a tremendous influence on issues like this. For example, illegal search and seizure. I mean, they make those rules, and that has a direct effect on the policing of communities. Now, if Kaepernick feels like, hey, harsher law and order rules are actually good for people of color, okay, fine, then you vote one way. If you think, no, it makes bad outcomes, then you vote another. But it's more, and it's deeper than that. The president also appoints lower federal judges who have great discretion in terms of sentencing guidelines. How about this? Because Jason Whitlock brings this up a lot. If you're talking about black and brown lives matter, in fact, interaction with police is not nearly as important as mass incarceration, which this election will also have an enormous impact on. For example, drug laws. I brought up search and seizure. I brought up all these other drug laws. They're finally starting to untangle the drug laws through the court, which will alleviate the problem over time of mass incarceration. If that gets all stitched back together, which based on who Trump is likely to appoint versus who Hillary was likely to appoint, it likely will get stitched back together. What do you think is going to happen to mass incarceration of black and brown folk? I mean, the idea that he treats both candidates the same because of systematic oppression as though they will have no effect on the system is so juvenile. It's either juvenile or extremely lazy. Shame on you, Colin Kaepernick. You know, smarten up, kid. He's not a college player. He's an adult. And he talks about how he's becoming socially conscious and he's getting his eyes open. Open them a little bit wider. How about this? Google it. It takes 5 seconds. How hard is this stuff? It is outrageous for him to make those comments.
Not only is it outrageous, but it's ignorant and selfish, like you said. It's ignorant for all the reasons that you pointed out, but it's also selfish because he was clearly thinking about himself instead of the lives that he purportedly was interested in impacting when he took the stance that he took. So we have to take that into consideration. And oh, by the way, Max, you know what? Of all the things that you said, there's one thing that you didn't bring up. Hillary Rodham Clinton and Donald Trump weren't the only presidential candidates.
Right. Well, they were.
Yeah, Gary Johnson.
They were, in fact.
Well, I'm just saying.
One or the other was going to get elected.
I'm just saying, you go. That's true, but you could have gone to the polls.
Sure, Jill
and
Stein.
refused to vote for them by voting for Jill Stein or voting for Gary Johnson. You could have done that. It wasn't going to get you anywhere, but at least you would have exercised the right that people fought, bled, and died for you to have. That's the point in all of this. And it's one thing, it's bad enough not to vote, but to then sit there and to tell the world that you didn't vote after taking the stance that you took and essentially contributing to further dividing this nation during an election year where they were already divided. This is one of the things that nobody has brought up, but I'm going to bring it up right here on First Take. When you think about those folks, and we talk about folks activating themselves in an election, Max, haven't y'all found yourselves, Max Molly, at some point in time or another, even though you were going to vote anyway, even though you had a position and there was a stance that you were going to take anyway, you found yourself further incentivized by things that may have happened in moments, whether it's weeks, days, hours, or whatever the case may be, leading up to an election? When you think about Colin Kaepernick taking a kneel for the national anthem, and you thought about how a segment of our populace took that, okay, and how they reacted to that, it literally became a discussion. I was on Good Morning America about 3 or 4 times talking about this issue. The national television shows, the networks, radio airwaves, and beyond. This was a story that everyone was fixed upon for weeks. You're trying to tell me that those kind of thoughts never entered anybody's mind when they ultimately went to the polls
thinking about the kind of folks who were supporting Colin Kaepernick and the kind of folks who were against Colin Kaepernick, and then attaching that to Trump or Hillary Clinton and deciding once again that may influence them themselves. This is not a small issue. So for Colin Kaepernick to come out and to announce to the world that he ain't voting, you understand, it was completely hypocritical, irresponsible, and selfish, because all he was thinking about was himself.
Sure, we're talking about principle here, and I want to talk to Kaepernick directly about the specifics. That's why I brought up illegal search and seizure, stop and frisk, who's likely to be the head of the Department of Justice, Supreme Court justices, lower federal court justices, sentencing guidelines. I mean, it's been proven, by the way, I mean, this is a statistical fact, that for the same crime, black and brown people are sentenced much more harshly than non-black or than white people, right? So what kind of federal judges do you think are going to be appointed by one administration or the other? Cap, it takes a little bit of research. You have to do it. Look how excited the private prison industry was when Trump got elected. Private prisons, an outrage in modern life. Or maybe Kaepernick thinks, no, privatize prisons. That's a good idea. The point is, you have to find out about the idea that that both candidates represented the same thing in terms of systematic oppression of black and brown lives is so ignorant it defies description. And this is coming from someone who supported Kaepernick by and large in his protest. I didn't support him wearing the Castro shirt or the socks with the police depicted as pigs, but in every other instance, I supported him. I said, good for him. He's being brave. He's being smart. But this is the opposite of that.
By the way, Max, the private prison system that you brought up, did you know that the stock market has climbed over the last 24 hours or so just because of that?
Yep.
Just because of that.
Yeah, people are investing in
what that means, Colin Kaepernick, people are investing in the prison system. They think they can profit off of it, and as a result, it's buffered our stock market to some degree. But Colin Kaepernick, oh no, I mean, voting's not going to make any difference whatsoever.
That's also connected to the drug laws and to mass incarceration and to outcomes of policing of communities. So, Colin Kaepernick, is there really no difference on the impact of black and brown lives dependent on the outcome of this election? Are you kidding? Do you not own a computer? Do you have no one to talk to? Can you read a book? Do you know how to vet information? It's an outrage.
And clearly he's misguided, has a lot more research and education he needs. I'd love if someone like you could sit down with him, Max.
Selfish.
It would be great. I'd love if you had a sit-down interview with someone like him and further this conversation. Yeah, it's selfish, it's ignorant, and
I would absolutely be open to that.
And he needs to delve much deeper into these issues because it feels like it's very surface, his knowledge on them. Coming up next, we go back to the association. Dwyane Wade and Pat Riley won 3 championships together in Miami, and now he returns to South Beach as a member of the Bulls. But did he make a mistake leaving the beach for Chi-Town? That discussion coming up.
Hi, I'm Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world, and the people of Jamaica love and watch for a steak.
And this is a call to action right now. We're less than 3 weeks away from the First Take Your Take contest, and I want you guys to bring it. It's about content and delivery. You can debate Stephen A and Max right here on national TV. Come to ESPN headquarters. Go to firsttakeyourtake.com. Upload your best debate. Keep it clean, plus no music, team logos, trademarks, or copyrighted material. 2 winners will be selected by our show staff. We're getting down to the wire, people. Need you to bring it and take on these 2. Here's a few of our latest.
Did Colin Kaepernick betray his stance? Yes, he did betray his stance. I honestly do not feel that he should have just sat there and did nothing. There is no way you can get change in this country without having the power in the government to do so.
If he believes that right that people died for, to not only have the right to vote, but to be free thinkers, doesn't he have that right to determine who deserves his vote?
You didn't exercise your 15th Amendment. You didn't even honor the ones that fought for the right for you. Instead, you didn't vote at all? That is disheartening, that is disappointing, and quite frankly, embarrassing.
I like that one at the end, by not honoring the ones that fought for you. Thoughts, guys?
People feel
well,
strongly
listen,
about it.
I thought the lady at the end was good. I thought the lady at the end was very, very, very good. She was passionate. She felt strongly about it. It's just that this is one of those days where, you look at the things that people have to say, and, Colin Kaepernick's got us all in a sour mood with his hypocrisy and selfishness as far as I'm concerned. But I'll look at those videos again and give you a more enlightened, more enthusiastic opinion.
I like that she said it's
forward.
embarrassing.
Yeah, and
I like that word.
Incidentally, because we both went hard at Kaepernick today, I think we should extend, obviously, an open-ended invitation on this subject for Kaepernick to join the join the show,
yep.
And Freudian slip, I guess, and defend himself and explain himself and talk about it.
Of course, always welcome. We would love that. Continue the dialogue. Meanwhile, Dwyane Wade not having much dialogue. Let me explain. He was the face of the Heat for 13 years, helping to bring 3 championships in 2006, 2012, and 2013 to Wade County and Pat Riley's organization. So he was a free agent this summer, hoping to retire with the Heat. But after he and the team could not come to an agreement, he joined the Bulls.
I think I've been very open and honest about, my respect and love for Pat, but also I've been honest that I haven't spoken to him since the season ended. I know who Pat is. It's no secret to me. I was there 13 years. I've seen a lot of players come and go. I know how he is. So if you're not with him, you're against him. That's just the way he is. So, you got to understand that.
Oh, Stephen A., it's going to be an emotional night. Did he make a mistake, do you think, Dwyane Wade leaving the Heat?
It doesn't look that way at this moment with the Miami Heat being 2-4 and starting the likes of some dude named Luke Babbitt, for crying out loud. But I will tell you that I do think he made a mistake because I mean, it's a personal feeling for me. I think the Miami Heat is a first-class organization. I think that Dwyane Wade is the greatest champion that South Beach has ever seen. He is South Beach, for crying out loud. It's Wade County down there. And seeing him in another uniform, it just should not have come to this. I don't blame him for it. I just think it's a mistake because I don't consider the Chicago Bulls a championship contender. I consider them exactly what they are right now with their 4-4 record. They're an average team with studs like a Jimmy Butler to play with D. Wade, and Rondo's not bad, but I don't consider them an elite team. And Dwyane Wade is a future Hall of Famer. He is somebody that I look to when I think about champions in today's NBA. And the fact that he's on a team that I believe has virtually no shot of capturing a championship is not an ideal situation. Now, obviously, you look at Miami, Max, and you see a 2-4 record, and you're saying, well, what's the big deal with that? But you have to remember, at the time he left, we still were in the thought process that Chris Bosh could potentially come back. We didn't think that he would be finished. And so Chris Bosh supposedly at the time was supposed to be there. It would have been him with Hassan Whiteside, with Goran Dragic, and what have you. And I was of the mindset that last year, if it were not for an injury to Chris Bosh, the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers would have been playing in the conference finals. And when you think about the winner within that is Pat Riley, there is no question that Pat Riley, from the moment LeBron James left, Pat Riley, who thought about retiring, changed his mind, and he was on a mission to compete and to knock off the king. And Dwyane Wade was supposed to help pull that off. Now, again, both sides here, you got to look in the mirror. In the case of Pat Riley, you're an old school kind of guy that may have made that mistake because LeBron walked out the door on you. D. Wade ultimately walked out the door on you. And you got two of the preeminent stars in the game of basketball that felt, to some degree, a bit used and disrespected. If you're Pat Riley, I certainly would never accuse him of such things, but you have to address the fact that that's how they felt. And you can't be so old school that you're not being sensitive to their feelings because you needed these guys in order to help you win. And I think that's something that Pat Riley has to look in the mirror about. In the case of D. Wade, it's like, damn, if you're going to leave Miami, I know you're going home to Chicago, and I get that, but, that's always going to be the house that MJ built. You going home, it ain't the same. And at the end of the day, it was for $6-7 million. I seeing him in something other than a Miami Heat uniform, I think it needed to be for a better situation than the Chicago Bulls, which is something that I shared with D. Wade over the summer, Max, at the time he had made his decision.
I disagree with that. I think the time was right to leave Miami. First of all, I did not think Bosh was coming back because of how hard the Heat were fighting last year to make sure he wasn't coming back, and the fact that enough medical opinions had come out to say that it could be life-threatening, blood clots and these kind of things, or else the medication he has to take. I mean, there was a real legitimate medical concern.
At the time, those opinions weren't out, though.
Before Wade left, yes. I'd heard and read them, but at any rate, maybe you had information I didn't have. It's entirely possible you have information that everyone doesn't have on the NBA. But at the time, that was my impression, that Bosh ain't coming back. And if he does, not as a 35-minute-a-game player or something like that. The Big Three had run its course in Miami. LeBron went home, and then Dwyane Wade went home. It's not like LeBron going to Chicago. LeBron went home to Ohio. And Dwyane Wade to Cleveland. And Dwyane Wade went home to Chicago. He can do that, and LeBron could, because, no, you can never replace Jordan. But Jordan's not from Chicago. Wade is. So he actually go, and he, unlike Jordan when he went to the Wizards, right? It's not like Dwyane Wade is going home when he has nothing left. He's fundamentally a different player. No, Wade still got some ball left in him. So that's a little bit different than just an old player leaving. If you look at the history of the Miami Heat and Pat Riley, and they're one and the same, really, Pat Riley starts by grabbing Alonzo Mourning and Tim Hardaway, a guard and a big, and he goes on a run there. Not quite good enough. So then he gets Shaq and Wade, and he wins the whole thing. And then Shaq gets a little older, and so now you get the Big Three, and he wins the whole thing again. But it's boom bust with Pat Riley, the way he's run the Heat. It's you wait to get your ducks in a row, put it all together, try to be really good, and then there's a fallow period after that. And I think it's fair to say, although I agree with you, if every little thing went right on the Heat last year, maybe they could have wound up in the conference finals. I think it's fair to say that they're in more of a fallow period right now, the Heat. And I think Wade may have seen that coming, or whether or not he did, that's the fact of the matter, and he looks at Chicago and goes, I can go home when I can still ball. I can't pass that up.
But that's not why he left. I mean, he had an opportunity to go to Denver for $53 million. He turned that down. He knew it was a better look for him to go home to Chicago for $47 million. Miami wouldn't move off of $41 million. That makes no sense to me because D. Wade was definitely worth the additional $6 million. He felt disrespected. He felt taken for granted. He knew that they had to prioritize Hassan Whiteside, re-signing him. He had no problem with that. Hassan Whiteside shoved aside $4 million so they could have max dollars to give to Kevin Durant in the event that they got KD. Where I totally fault Miami is when you knew that you could not get Kevin Durant. That was when you should have stepped up and gave D. Wade that additional $6 to $7 million that he wanted. The fact that you wouldn't do so when the various times in the past you had asked him to take a pay cut, and then you turn around and say, well, we really didn't ask him. He elected to do so because he wanted to have a better team. We appreciate it, but blah, blah, blah. That doesn't cut the mustard. So if you're talking about culpability, I agree with you that it's mostly on Pat Riley, who's first class all the way, who's an elite champion. I love what he represents and what he means to the game of basketball in the NBA, but I think he could have handled the D. Wade situation just a little bit better.
Let me ask you this.
At the same time,
because sometimes two things happen when they just dovetail well. On the one hand, Wade gets to go home. On the other hand, Pat Riley gets out of the real decline years of Wade's career where he goes from still a really good player to, at the end of a contract, maybe not such a good player who you have to pay money and use up cap space on.
Well, first of all, D. Wade is averaging 17 and 4 right now. Last year he was averaging 19. Mm-hmm. Last year he looked like he had become younger than he looked the previous years. So once he's proven to you that you've underestimated him because of the bevy of injuries he had prior to that, then excuse me, again, if we're talking about a new contract with an additional $20 million or something like that, I get you, Max. $6 to $7 million.
I'm saying Pat Riley could use that as an excuse.
You got to come up to that if you're.
I'm just saying
you got to come up to that if you're Miami.
Pat Riley is using that as an excuse to move on, to turn the page on Wade in a way that doesn't look terrible for him.
Guys, we got to move on because I want to have time for this next subject.
Wait, I'm sorry.
That's probable, but it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't have happened. All right.
Coming up next, Dan Carpenter's wife gets backlash for her critical tweet of Richard Sherman after this controversial play on Monday night. Don't miss how these guys feel about her response when we come back.
I'm Andy Katz from ESPN, along with my co-host Seth Greenberg. On Courtside with Cats and Coach G, we'll be joined by Arizona head coach Sean Miller and Indiana head coach Tom Crean in advance of the Armed Forces Classic in Honolulu.
Monday night, there was a controversial play involving Richard Sherman and Bills kicker Dan Carpenter, where Sherman should have been flagged for unnecessary roughness. Dan's wife, Kayla Carpenter, took to Twitter with a highly offensive visual and message directed towards Richard Sherman, insinuating he should be treated like an animal. Kayla received a lot of backlash for her tweet and released the following statement. My attempt at humor during a heated and highly controversial NFL game has not been received the way I intended. When I saw the out-of-control nature of the events that happened on the field, I jokingly wanted to relate it to life on the farm where I grew up and how it would have been handled there. Unfortunately, I did not realize that a tone of racism would dominate the response to what I intended to be a lighthearted defense of my husband. Regardless of the narrative that has been attached to my post, it was never intended to be related to race or the disgusting hatred that creates for the basis of racism. Here's Sherman on her apology.
It's not surprising at all. I mean, this is a day and age, you got Ku Klux Klan running around. You know, people say whatever they want, and there's very little consequence. For her to say something like that and then have a BS apology like she did, I mean, it's just the way of the world. You know, I don't let it bother me. It's something I'm very used to, you know. You know, it's just the way people are, you know, the way people were raised. You get it from the you know, social media cowards all the time, but nobody's ever said it to my face. Most people don't live that kind of life. You know, people are much more brave behind the screen, no consequence, no chance of any altercation or anything, any consequence. When somebody actually has to say something to someone's face and deal with the consequences, they're a lot more reserved.
Stephen A., your reaction to Kayla Carpenter's statement?
Well, I echo what Richard Sherman said. It was BS. A matter of fact, I found myself even more alarmed today than I was yesterday. Yesterday, I thought she came across as highly insensitive. When you're comparing Richard Sherman to an animal and you're talking about castrating him, I didn't bring up the word racism or anything like that because I was just saying it came across as highly insensitive, and that's how you looked. I wasn't necessarily even measuring your intent. I'm just saying this is what you said. This is the graphic that you put up there on your Twitter page, and it was beyond the pale, and you should apologize publicly and immediately. But after I read her statement, first of all, there's nothing in here that says I'm sorry. There's nothing in here that remotely resembles an apology. And then she sits up there and the first line really resonated with me profoundly. My attempt at humor. Really? So let me get this straight. Comparing this black man to an animal was humorous. Talking about him being castrated is humorous. Bringing up the fact that this is the kind of stuff that happened on the farm, you find humor in that. Oh, really? So now I'm really looking at you, and I'm really looking at you hardcore. I applaud the fact that she's coming to the defense of her husband. Okay, Max, you're married. One day I will be, and I hope my wife comes to my defense strongly as well. Any man would want that from his wife. But at the same time, she went beyond the pale. Her explanation was weak. It was devoid of any level of contrition. As far as I could tell, essentially what this statement from her, indicates is that, look, I said what I said. I meant what I meant. Please just don't call me a racist because of it. And she seems oblivious to the fact that this is something that black men have had to deal with throughout our history. And when you look at a guy like Richard Sherman, who was from the streets of Compton, went to Stanford, graduated from Stanford, and still had a year of eligibility left for football. So while he stayed there to play football, he was going for his master's. This is who we're talking about. Perennial All-Pro, a multi-millionaire, highly accomplished at what he does. And oh, by the way, dreads and all, tats on his arms and all, has never been in trouble with the law. This is who we're talking about here. And that's the way you're talking about, because your husband, a kicker, all right, got hit by Richard Sherman in a fashion where he should have clearly been flagged for roughing the kicker penalty. That's all you got.
And this is what prompted you to go to this point. So her apology indeed was BS because it was no apology whatsoever. It was devoid of contrition. And as far as I'm concerned, she should be ashamed of herself, and we should still be demanding an apology from her towards Richard Sherman, whether he does or not, because throughout our history, plenty of black men have been stigmatized and characterized in such a salacious and insulting fashion. And if that had been done to her by Richard Sherman, I assure you the consequences would have been far more profound in the court of public opinion. The same should be applicable to her. She should not get a pass on this at any turn.
We went over a lot of this yesterday, and I talked about the history of race and gender, and when they intersect at times, white women toward black men, objectifying them, dehumanizing them in this kind of way especially resonates. And, of course, people immediately, their mind is going to go to race. Now, if whether or not you find her explanation credible, and I think it strains credulity that she is existing in her own mind in this post-racial world, particularly given what's just gone on in our politics in this country. You mentioned it. She never said, I'm sorry. That was not an apology. So there was nothing for Richard Sherman to accept or reject. She never said, Richard Sherman, I'm sorry. I said this and I shouldn't have. P.S. I want to explain why I did it. X, Y, and Z. And then you can deal with whether or not you find that credible. But the apology never took place. And she clearly owes him one. And at that point, it's up to him whether he wants to accept it or reject it. At this point, he rejected the non-apology apology.
She must not have wanted to apologize, though, because she never said, I'm sorry. So she must have not thought that she did anything wrong. Well, that's what this tells me. She must have thought that she didn't do anything wrong. We took it the wrong way. So that's why she explained her intent.
Well, clearly she was either watching this show or somebody told her about it because we brought it up the way that we did. But let's be very, very clear. I meant every word I said, and I stand by it. And as far as I'm concerned, it was an apology. And I appreciate, you know what? I actually appreciate to some degree the fact that it was devoid of an apology. It was devoid of the contrition that one would expect. Because as far as I'm concerned, she exposed herself even more than I thought she would have. She showed exactly what she is. She was on a farm. And you know what? This is how we look at certain folks. And, I'm going to equate Richard Sherman with an animal. And I'm going to talk about castrating him because my husband got hurt on the job, doing a job where it's entirely possible that you would get hurt because folks have a license to assault
Stephen
one
A,
another
I see it,
in the sport of football, even a kicker.
I see her explanation a little bit different. I think that she's saying, I grew up on a farm, and this is the way we would make a joke. According to her, it's a joke, even though she's admitting that things were heated, and it must come from a place in her where she fears for the, future income of her family, right? If he's the breadwinner playing in the NFL and making money. But she claims it was meant in jest, or to make light of a serious situation. She's saying, hey, this is the way we talked on the farm. And parenthetically, in my own mind, I exist in this post-racial world where I would say this about anyone. I don't see black or white. I think that, as I said, strains credulity. It's hard to imagine, especially given the current climate in this country, that she's living in some post-racial world in her mind. But even if she is, and therefore doesn't want to apologize because it makes it seem as though she's guilty of something. The fact is she did say that thing. It can be taken in that context. And for that reason alone, even if I'm wrong and she's being 100% honest about this, she should say, whoa, I wasn't thinking. I'm sorry.
She wasn't making a joke.
She didn't say that.
She wasn't making a joke.
No, it doesn't seem that she was.
She was not. She was heated.
My last comment.
Yeah.
My last comment I will say is this. If indeed there are people out there who want to accept that this is where she's from, and those are the kind of statements that are being made, all right? And I'm certainly not saying anybody on this show is excusing it because I didn't take that from you, Max, or Molly at all. I'm simply saying for those out there who feel that just because she comes from a particular place and that's the way they communicate, if that's the excuse, fine. Then there's a whole bunch of stuff that a whole bunch of people should be allowed to say without hearing a word from anybody.
People fear what they don't know. We'll leave it there. After the break, how did Stephen A. feel about James Harden being the Rockets' point guard?
I think he's the toughest guard in the NBA. First of all, he's big. He's strong. He finishes at the basket. 3-point shots. He got a mid-range game. One of the best passers in the league, leading the league in assists right now. There's nothing that he can't do on the offensive end of the floor to affect the basketball game.
Fear the beard. The Rockets knocked off the Spurs in a battle of Texas last night behind a huge night from James Harden. He finished the game with his 10th career triple-double, 24 points, 15 assists, and 12 rebounds. Harden averaging a career high in points, assists, and field goal percentage this season. Stephen A., do you still think it's not good for D'Antoni to use Harden as a point guard?
Well, obviously, I'd look like a damn fool if I said no, but I guess I'm a damn fool because that's how I feel. Let's see as the season progresses. Let's be clear, and let me be very accurate, rather very clear and concise about what I had to say. James Harden is a superstar. He's averaging 30 and 13 and 8. We know he could do this. We knew he could do this because he played the point sometimes when he was in Oklahoma City. What I said that it wasn't a good idea because of two components that had very little to do with James Harden. It wasn't just that he's got a penchant for shooting and holding the ball. It was because you have a system with D'Antoni, okay, who isn't known for playing defense, and you're going to get rid of the ball in like 7 to 10 seconds. And so there's a lot of shots that's going to be jacked up. There's not going to be much fluidity to the offense, and then you're going to be resigned to just watching James Harden put on the individual kind of show that he's capable of putting on. Having said that, let me take a moment to give D'Antoni credit. The defense is ranked 21st. That's not that great. But they're leading the league in 3 points attempted, and they're 6th in the league in terms of percentage of the 3 points made. You got to give a lot of credit to that. James Harden is definitely giving up the rock. It helps that Ryan Anderson is hitting 48% of his three-pointers right now, and Eric Gordon has shown life as well. So he deserves a lot of credit for that. But it's still early in the season. You're 5-3. You've had games against the Knicks. You've had 2 games against Dallas. Yes, you've played Cleveland and Atlanta and San Antonio as well, even though you lost to the Lakers too. But I guess what I'm saying is I need to see more as this season progresses, as folks figure out what D'Antoni exactly is doing on offense, because on offense, the man knows what he's doing. And you got to give credit where credit is doing. He's doing a good job thus far. But in the end, I'll wait and see. Right now, numbers-wise, it appears to be the right decision. I appear to be wrong, but I'm thinking about what Houston can be as a team in terms of the postseason picture and how formidable they're going to be with James Harden doing this as the elite teams or the better teams come at you, particularly the better defensive teams. I don't know as of yet. Right now, it looks like the right decision, but I'm just not convinced. It has nothing to do with James Harden's skills. He's a superstar. I'm just not sure it's good for him to be the point guard against the better teams as the season progresses. But I'll admit I'm wrong if that time comes. I just don't think I will be.
This is exactly what I thought was going to happen with Harden running the point for D'Antoni. Look, of course they're not going to win a championship. The D'Antoni team's not going to win a championship, particularly not with Harden as their best player. Ain't going to happen. D'Antoni doesn't care about defense, and neither does Harden. It's one of the reasons they're a great match. They both care so much about the offense. And the thing about Harden, Stephen A. Smith, is he was always the point guard anyway. The offense ran through him anyway. The difference is, back then, pre-D'Antoni, he'd hold the ball, as you mentioned, and he would look for his own shot. And if he could get to the foul line or the free throw line, or if he could get off his own shot, great. And if not, as the shot clock's winding down, he'd get the ball to someone else for a less than very high percentage shot. With D'Antoni, what I knew was going to happen is the offense is still going to work through him, but he's going to use his offensive prowess to get other players open looks way earlier in the shot clock so the ball wouldn't stick with him as much. Now, and that's what's happening. Now, do I think he's an MVP? No. Although he is running that system like to perfection right now, he and Blake Griffin and a couple others are really playing the way their coaches want them to play extremely well. I just don't think he's the best player in the league. I think this is what D'Antoni does. D'Antoni is a coach for a team that maybe has a chance to win 45-plus games, be exciting, have highlights on SportsCenter all the time, have have the country talking about them, the NBA talking about them, but ultimately not play enough defense to advance very far in the playoffs. The advantage of that is players on D'Antoni's teams, their stats get inflated. They look better than they really are because usually people are mainly paying attention to offense. And the good thing from a GM's point of view, if Daryl Morey survives as the GM of the Rockets, is that you then have these inflated assets that you can trade for actually good players when it's time to move on from D'Antoni. And I think Harden fits that with D'Antoni perfectly. Harden's an excellent player, but D'Antoni is making him look like Superman, and considering they ain't winning a championship anyway, it's a really, really good marriage.
It's entertaining. It's a good marriage to appease James Harden, but it's not going to facilitate a star of his caliber capturing a championship. That system's not going to work for that, particularly with him at the point guard spot. Other people are going to get involved naturally, but it's not going to be because James Harden is back there trying to be Chris Paul. It's going to be because you're getting rid of the ball so quickly because you're shooting shots in under 10 to 12 seconds, sometimes earlier, that as a result of that, there are going to be more offensive opportunities for his teammates. That's a good deal because you got 9 guys averaging at least 15 minutes a game and a 10th dude in this kid Montrezl Harrell out of Louisville that's averaging about 12. But in the grand scheme of things, is this going to facilitate Harden winning the way he wants to win? I don't think so, and that's my measuring stick as to whether a move is best or not.
All right, let's leave it there. When we come back, we'll wrap up this Friday Eve, or like Stephen A. likes to say, this Thursday show. A few more items to discuss with you. Stay tuned. How about the Clippers off to the best start in franchise history at 7-1 after knocking off the Trailblazers last night? Max, is this start a big deal or no big deal?
It's a big deal. See, the Clippers are not only playing good defense, but Blake Griffin, an interesting thing happened last year with Blake Griffin, Stephen A. I think Blake tried to have a more kind of well-rounded game, but as a result, he was less efficient. He wasn't at the rim as much. And I thought, given his style of play, is he already feeling it in his knees or something else to the point where he's athletically maybe not, something's going on and decline somehow, even though he's relatively young still. He's jumped a lot in the NBA. And then the playoffs came and it was like, nope. He can still turn it on when he wants, but now his game is more well-rounded, and he can save those athletic bursts for when he needs it. And the result of that well-rounded game and that extension of his range,
running out of time, Max.
They have an unguardable offense.
3 blowout victories over San Antonio, Detroit, and Portland is nice. Well, let's see what they do tomorrow night to avenge the one loss they have on this season to Oklahoma City. But in the end, they're the 4th-ranked defense. They're number 1 in field goal percentage defense, number 3 against the three-point shot. They're defending. I love what I'm seeing from Maurice Bates off the bench with Raymond Felton, but I'm still not sold. It's too early. I ain't getting caught up in that sauce again with the Clippers. Not yet.
They're the third-party candidate this year.
Stephen A., tomorrow's Feel Good Friday. My man. Thanks so much for listening to the pod. Catch First Take weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific on ESPN2. Have a great day.
Ole Miss heads to College Station Saturday night to face Texas A&M.
Stiff arm, down he goes. Down he goes.
Coverage begins Saturday at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.